Throughout this series, I've talked about the inevitable versus the unique. Just take a second and try to think of a unique, widespread, widely used invention that, but for one person or chance interaction, might not have existed. It's hard. I typed this question into ChatGPT. What inventions in history were not inevitable? It came back with several answers. The printing press, photography, the microwave. But I don't think any of these fit the category. Writing is inevitable, and a way to mass produce writing was also inevitable, as was the eventual process of forever capturing a still image. Now, when it comes to creativity, breaking a bit from science, there's room for uniqueness. And this is where the great man theory comes into play. If Thomas Edison had died before he could complete the light bulb, someone else would have. If Henry Ford had died as a child, someone else would have built an assembly line and a mass-produced vehicle. But if W.P. Kinsella had died young, or had never been born, it's likely that no one else would have written a book about ghost baseball players walking out of the cornfields of Iowa. And if James Horner had not been born, or had died young, we would not have anything close to the musical score we do have for the movie Field of Dreams. According to Field of Dreams director Phil Alden Robinson, and according to James Horner himself, Horner did something during the creation of his score that no one else had ever done. And his unorthodox approach led to a one-of-a-kind soundtrack. After the shooting of Field of Dreams ended, they needed music to complement and bolster the themes and emotional intentions of this film. So they turned to James Horner. And history would be made.
This book really should have never been written. The film should have never been made.
I sort of have this feeling that one of the reasons I was born, was to be part of this, to get this out into the culture.
What they didn't count on was the word of mouth, that people would see it and then just say, oh my God, you have to go see this movie. It ended up defying the odds.
Midnight Library of Baseball presents Season 2, The Making of Field of Dreams. From unlikely inception to enduring impact across generations. And as always, no loud music or jarring sounds. I'm Ben Orlando. Nothing terrifies a movie studio more than not knowing what one of its employees is doing. And from the studio's perspective, this quote-unquote traditional composer, James Horner, suddenly went rogue while working on the film Field of Dreams. And they didn't know what to do. At this point, in 1988, James Horner was already well known in Hollywood. He'd done music for 2 Star Trek films, the sequel to Alien, the 80s icon Cocoon, The Land Before Time, and another animated hit, An American Tail, starring Fievel the Mouse. And these last 2 films, An American Tail and The Land Before Time, were number 3 and 4 for top-grossing animated films during the 1980s. For many of these scores, especially An American Tail, Horner was known for dramatic orchestral productions. So he was a big deal, and a big get for Phil Alden Robinson. But it was nowhere near a guarantee that Horner would agree to do the project. According to Robinson, Horner was the first outsider to watch the completed edit of the film. So this means they finished shooting, they put together all the scenes, adjusted all the visuals and sounds, everything except for the music. And now this was a chance to see what someone on the outside would think of Field of Dreams. And to be clear, James Horner was not a baseball fan, was not much into sports, period. So Phil Alden Robinson and a few others sat in a dark screening room, holding their breaths, while the film played from start to finish. When it ended, James Horner stood, and without saying a word, he walked out of the room. From Phil Alden Robinson.
I thought, oh my God, it's so bad he can't even say, it's interesting, but you know what, fellas, I'm too busy to do it. He just left the room. And I almost, the veins in my wrist opened up almost by themselves. And his agent, Mike Gorfain, said, geez, Phil, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say.
It turns out that James Horner did not leave the room in silence because he didn't care. After the film ended, he was so moved he couldn't speak. He had to leave the room before his emotions overwhelmed him. When he returned, James Horner was still wiping away the tears. He told Phil Alden Robinson that he was speechless, to which Robinson replied, "You don't have to say anything but yes." So James Horner said yes. This video that I saw, which was so fascinating, it was you and James Horner talking about the music and how that's put together, and I mean just so many interesting elements there. One thing that he said and the two of you talked about was this spontaneity of putting it together that hadn't been done before. Is that
Yeah.
that's true?
Oh, yeah. It was a very courageous approach to scoring a film where he said to me, this film is delicate and I don't want to go in. We knew we didn't want a big orchestra all through the film. He said, and I also don't want to write everything out beforehand. I'd like it to, the film is so delicate. I'd like to have something that we can kind of create in the studio from an overall scheme. So he wrote 4 or 5 one-line phrases, musical phrases, and played them for me at home on his piano. And he said, you know, some of these will be glass harp or synthesizers and primitive Bolivian instruments. I'm just going to have a bunch of stuff there and we'll paint. He said, I want to paint. And I didn't know what that meant. And I said, okay.
To back up for a minute, James Horner's unorthodox, rogue move was to create the musical score on the spot, without practicing, without composing and writing things down. This was not what people did. As Horner described, this process was not a known technique, and the studio was pulling its hair out trying to get something from him that didn't exist. From James Horner talking with Phil Alden Robinson.
You hadn't written anything out, had you?
No, it was all in my head. It would have been a disaster if something had happened to me.
But only for that reason.
For that reason, yeah. There was a problem afterwards when the copyright department at the studio called me and asked me for the score. I mean, that went on for 3 weeks. That was unheard of. There was no score for this
Oh, I never
film.
heard this.
Oh, gosh. I must have gotten 3 dozen calls, and my agent got calls. They thought that I was playing a game, and I somehow didn't want to turn in music to them. But there was no printed music at all.
Had anybody else done that to that point that you know of?
Not that I know of. I don't think most people dare do that. It sounds crazy, but to get that kind of freedom and get that kind of fluidity in the music, you can't do it writing all the notes down. You have to kind of be right on top of it so that you know how it's all going to work out, but you have to be fluid enough that things will change.
When I think of the true artist, I think of someone launching handfuls of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. For the artist, all of that spaghetti is meaningful and relevant and packed with themes and symbolism and emotional expression. But if the wall here represents the public audience, only a small portion of what is good and meaningful to the artist is also good and meaningful and engaging to the audience. And for studios, only that small portion of spaghetti that sticks is what matters. But the benefit of proving you can create art that really sticks is that you can introduce more of your artistic self into the corporate model. James Horner had proved himself again and again. He'd helped studios make millions and millions of dollars. And now he was going to listen to himself. And if listening to himself meant, instead of a big orchestra, we're going to have panpipes, then so be it. That's right, I said panpipes. From Phil Alden Robinson.
And I got a phone call. They said, do you know what he's doing? He's flying in some flute player from England. It's costing us, I don't know, however much money. And I said, no, you got it all wrong. It's not one, it's two. It's not that much money, it's twice as much. And it's not flute, it's panpipes. And that seemed to assuage them for some reason.
When Horner imagined the Iowa corn rustling in the wind, he thought of panpipes. By the way, of the many, many things I learned while researching this season, I discovered that in order to tune panpipes, you need to use, wait for it, peanuts. From James Horner.
You know, they keep a little dish of Planters peanuts and various nuts, because they would bite off a little piece and put a little piece down to bring the pitch up, because when you drop a piece of peanut down, you're essentially blocking up part of the length, and so the thing gets shorter and the pitch goes up, etc. And then they tip it upside down and get it out to make it lower again, this kind of thing.
Thing is, Phil Alden Robinson didn't know this trick. He just wanted a snack.
I saw this jar of nuts, and I was talking to him, and I reached and I grabbed one, and I thought, man, these nuts are like stale. These are really old. And I realized this is what they've been tuning their instruments with for a couple of years.
Exactly.
I felt very badly.
If you like the show and crave more content, you can become a Patreon member, where you'll have access to additional audio episodes, video interviews, and other articles and images linked to the show. Go to Patreon/Midnight Library of Baseball. And since this is a one-man production, every bit of support helps. You can donate at midnightlibraryofbaseball.com, and you can add reviews on iTunes and Spotify. Okay, back to the show. While the studio pulled their hair and continued to believe that James Horner was going to create this sweeping, grandiose, orchestral score similar to An American Tail, James Horner tinkered inside his mind. He daydreamed. He let the ideas and melodies float wherever they wished. When he finally walked into the studio with Phil Alden Robinson and a handful of musicians, including 2 panpipe players, Horner had only a few simple 5 or 10 note themes. But that was enough to start painting.
The first theme I played you was sort of the call. It was like the sort of a timeless call theme. I wanted to set the stage that something was going to happen.
Right. And then there was a theme that you called the Irish theme. That was your shorthand reference to it.
Oh, yeah, right. I guess that theme was most closely allied with Kevin Costner's character.
When he talks about his father.
His father, right. Right. And then we tried a lot of things by feel, where I would play like the chords. And then we'd try. And that would be, certain scenes that would be the only kind of instance of it, and it wouldn't be fully fleshed out, and then other times it would be elaborated on.
And then at the end, the whole orchestra plays.
The whole orchestra amplifies
Right.
it, yeah, at the end.
With a few simple themes and series of notes, James Horner watched Field of Dreams, and he listened. He'd pause, work things out inside himself, and try something on the piano. Or he'd motion to one of the musicians in the room. Add something here. Include an E minor scale. No, not quite right. Try this. And Phil Alden Robinson was also part of the process, chiming in, making suggestions, linking the music to his thematic intentions. And this is how it went, hour after hour, day after day, for 2 weeks. From Robinson.
The arrangement was created in the studio, scene by scene by scene. By the time we got to the last scene, it was done. And it was fantastic. And I think he never would have been able to compose that as beautifully in advance. I think it needed the spontaneity in the studio, the interaction with the musicians to get this quality.
Sounds so fun.
It was really fun. It was 2 weeks of watching. He's one of the great film composers, and he had great people around him. It was just watching real creativity just flourish.
James Horner made a comment earlier that it would have been a disaster if something happened to him, since he had all the music in his head. Well, this was a bit of a prescient comment, because on June 22nd, 2015, while piloting a small turboprop airplane, Horner crashed into Los Padres National Forest in California and died. He was 61 years old. James Horner's assistant wrote, quote, "We have lost an amazing person with a huge heart and unbelievable talent who died doing what he loved," end quote. The world also lost the multiple scores forever locked in James Horner's mind. The score of Field of Dreams is unorthodox, and it is special. And it was conceived from the mind of a man who allowed his creative self to not only work hard, but to breathe, to drift in and out of those spaces of limbo. This score, written and composed by any other person, would have been something else entirely. But I think it's also important to note that while James Horner had signature elements to his works, he also had scores that were more traditional. But there was something about this film, something about watching Field of Dreams, that sent his mind and his heart in a new direction. And this, I believe, is a testament to Phil Alden Robinson and W.P. Kinsella. Like the foul lines of a ball field expanding forever and opening the door to infinite possibility, Kinsella and Robinson, through their creative processes, inspired others like James Horner to expand their imaginations towards infinity. We'll end the episode with one of our listener baseball stories. Tonight, we hear from John Sukanik from Washington, who, like Field of Dreams, has managed to use baseball as a vehicle for making deep emotional connections. And for many, they never saw it coming.
Today is my 968th consecutive day of playing catch. I literally play with anybody that I can find. I will ask strangers all the time. I always have gloves with me in my car or at work, and I just look for people to ask to play catch. And over the course of the last 968 days, I've played with 1,100 different people. There was a man in just outside Kansas City, and as far as I can tell, it's his idea. And he did it in 2018. He called it Catch 365, and he ended up writing a book about it. And I heard about this idea on a podcast, and it just became like I couldn't get it out of my head. And to use the Field of Dreams motif, I just go the distance. I just kept thinking about it. And so I decided to try it. And so I came home one night and I told my family that I was going to try it. And my wife was like, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Pass the ketchup." And I have two sons. And they were like, "Dad, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. This is ridiculous." And I said, "Yeah, it might be." And I went out and played catch with one of my boys that first night. And I haven't stopped since. You would think that a complete stranger coming up to somebody, "Hey, you want to go play catch?" You would think I would get a variety of, no, or people would run away, but only 2 people in this whole time have said no. And I think that's a testament to the game of baseball. I think we've all played catch at some point. Most of the people have when we're a kid, with our friends or our parents. The ball and the glove and the sound it makes and the back and forth rhythm of playing catch, there's something to it. And I think it draws people in. And then once you start playing catch, I've had the most amazing experiences with people as you connect. It's a great vehicle to connect with people. Early on in the first year, my wife and I end up in Portland, and we're at a deli having lunch. And I come out of the deli, and I'd been doing this for about a month, maybe a little less than a month yet. So I hadn't really found my groove of what was happening yet. And there was a man sitting at the picnic table eating lunch. And I said, "Oh, he was wearing a ball cap." So I went over to him and I said, "Hey, I know this sounds weird, but I'm doing this thing where I'm going to try to play catch every day for a year. Is there any way you'd play catch with me?" And he looked at me and he kind of got a weird look in his eye. And he said, "I love baseball. I used to play. I used to coach my kids. 4 years ago, I had a massive stroke and I almost died. And I had to relearn to walk, talk, eat, everything again." He goes, "I don't know that I can play catch. I don't know that I can catch a ball." And I said, "Are you willing to try?" And he said, "Yeah, you have gloves?" And I said, "Yeah, let me go get them." So on a sidewalk in Portland in front of the deli, I played catch with this guy and I threw him the ball and he catches it and he looks at it and he gets emotional and he throws it back. And he says, "I didn't ever know that I would ever play catch again." And so he said, "Thank you for asking a stranger to play catch." And I said, "Thank you for trusting a stranger to play catch." And we just had a really nice moment together. And I took a picture with him. I take a picture with everybody that I play with. And I go to get in the car to leave. And my wife is in the car and she's crying. And she says to me, "This isn't going to be about baseball, is it?" And I said, "No, I don't think it is. I think it's going to be about people." I was playing catch with a man, and he was talking to me about his dad and playing catch with his dad. And we ended up getting emotional, and I started crying, and he was crying, and it was just a nice moment. And we got done, and another guy came over, and he had been watching us play in this park. And he said, "I just want to tell you guys how cool that was to watch you play catch." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, I don't remember the last time I saw anybody playing catch. And here you are, two grown men in a park. You obviously are friends. You're crying. Something's going on. He goes, it was just beautiful to sit and watch. And I said to him, you want to know something even cooler? I said, I don't know that guy. And he goes, I don't believe you. I said, I just met him 20 minutes ago. I don't know him. And he goes, no way. And I said, well, let me tell you about what I'm doing. And I explained to him what I was doing, playing catch. And he said, that's amazing. He's like, can I play? When you play catch with somebody, it's intimate. We're sharing that moment with them. I have to stand there relatively close to you. We have to make eye contact with one another. You have to trust me and pay attention. We're not on our phones. You're using both sides of your brain, the ball and the rhythm and the sound. And you just talk like you wouldn't talk to people normally. And you lower your guard and you share things. So Field of Dreams to me, when I was 9, I lived in Alaska when I was growing up. And when I was 9 years old, my parents got a divorce. And shortly after, my mom remarried and we moved down to the Pacific Northwest. And my dad stayed in Alaska. And we would go visit him for the summers. And those were great times. But when we would leave to come back, it was really sad for me. And the last day was the worst day. You're sitting around waiting to go to the airport. And I knew that I wasn't going to get to see my dad for the rest of the year, most likely. And those days were hard. And to pass the time, my dad would get the gloves out and we'd go out in his front yard and we'd play catch. Because again, it gives you something to do. And you're there sharing that time with your dad, which is what I desperately wanted, more time with my dad. And we played catch. And for me, that's where playing catch starts, is 9 years old in the front yard of my dad's house in Anchorage, Alaska. Fast forward to 1989, Field of Dreams comes out. I go see it with a bunch of friends. And of course, Dad, you want to have a catch? And I just lose it. And I'm crying. And my friends are looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? What's wrong with this guy? And for me, that moment just took me back to being in the front yard with my dad. It just did. And it still does. I can't watch the movie today without thinking about my dad and getting teary-eyed. So this is 1989, as you know. There's no internet, there's no cell phones, there's none of that. So it took me a few years to realize that this was a real place. Like, they built this field. It's real. It's not a movie set. It exists. It exists in Iowa. And I thought, I gotta go. I have to go there with my dad and play catch. And I became obsessed with it. And life gets in the way. I went to college at Washington State. I got married, had kids. And in 2015, my stepfather passed away unexpectedly. And I just remember thinking, there's no guarantee in any of this. And so that year for Father's Day, my wife got me a present. She got me a poster and I open it up and it has a field of corn on it. And it says, Dad, do you want to have a catch? And taped to the poster was plane tickets for me and my dad and my 2 sons to go to Iowa. And so we did. And it was everything you could want it to be. It was magical. My dad and my 2 sons, we threw from the mound, we hit balls, we walked in the corn, we played catch. I cried the whole day. My dad's cried. It was, if you eliminate the day I got married and the day my kids were born, it might be my favorite day. I'm 51 years old. And it may be my favorite day is being on a field in Iowa, the middle of nowhere, with my dad and my sons having a catch. And so for me, part of why I keep going is that this playing catch every day helps me. I get to live that feeling a little bit every day.
Thanks, John, for sharing this incredible story. I hope one day we'll share a catch. In episode 12, we'll discuss some of the small but significant changes that occurred near the end of production. For instance, when Kevin Costner said, Dad, want to have a catch? That was not in the script, and for a very important reason. The line was dubbed in afterwards. Also, the name of the film, Field of Dreams, was not supposed to be Field of Dreams for most of the shooting. It was Shoeless Joe, just like the novel. But the studio wanted the name changed, and Phil Alden Robinson was livid.
Phil, when he finally got a studio to take it, and they would have called it Field of Dreams, he absolutely hated the name. He hated it. And he was really nervous about he was going to have to tell Bill, so he calls up Kinsella, and Kinsella says, and this is true, he said, well, the original title of the book was Dreamfields, so I'm fine with that name. And Phil was just shocked, and I thought Dreamfields was a horrible name myself. That's why it got changed.
Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball presents The Making of Field of Dreams. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergei Papkin and Ashot Danielyan. Good night.